They laughed at him. Not loudly, not boldly, not even in a way they thought he would notice. But he did. Because sometimes, it's not the volume of laughter that stays with you, it's the meaning behind it. The kind that says, "You don't belong here. You don't understand what you're doing. This won't work." And out there, on that land, those words didn't need to be spoken. They were already understood. Because nothing about that place suggested possibility. Not the soil, not the silence, and definitely not the machines. They had been sitting there for years, long enough for time to stop keeping track. Seasons had passed over them like they weren't even there. Summer heat cracking what little life was left in the ground. Winters settling frost into metal that no longer moved. Wind pushing dust through engines that hadn't turned in ages. At some point, they stopped being equipment and became something else. Reminders. Reminders of effort that didn't work. Of money that didn't come back. Of hope that ran out before the land ever gave anything in return. People didn't look at those machines anymore. Not really. They glanced at them. The same way you glance at something you've already accepted is gone. And when they talked about them, it was always in the past tense. That used to be a good tractor. That one ran strong back in the day. Shame how it ended up. No one asked if it could run again. Because to them, that question had already been answered. No. But Ethan Walker never believed in that kind of answer. Because for as long as anyone could remember, Ethan had made a living in the space between no and not yet. He wasn't known for building things from scratch. He wasn't known for chasing big opportunities. He was known for something quieter, something most people didn't even pay attention to. He fixed things, not the easy ones, not the obvious ones. The forgotten ones, the ones people had already tried to fix, failed, and walked away from. Engines that wouldn't turn, systems no one could figure out, machines that sat in barns for years, collecting dust and doubt at the same time. And Ethan would take them apart, not quickly, not forcefully, carefully, patiently, like he wasn't just fixing something, but listening to it, understanding it, because to him, nothing was ever truly useless, just misunderstood. And that belief, that quiet, stubborn belief, was exactly what brought him here, to that land, a ranch most people didn't even bother naming anymore. Because names are usually tied to value. And that place had lost its value a long time ago. Rain hadn't stayed long enough in years. It would come, lightly, briefly, just enough to remind everyone what used to be possible. And then it would disappear again, leaving behind soil that couldn't hold on to it. Soil that seemed to reject growth. Season after season, the same pattern repeated. Plant, hope, wait, and then nothing. Not failure all at once, just less growth, less color, less life, until eventually there was nothing left to measure. The last man who owned it had tried everything, new seed types, different planting cycles, irrigation adjustments, even outside consultants who promised they had seen land like this before. They all said the same thing in different ways. It can be fixed. But it never was. And when he finally walked away, he didn't make a scene. He didn't argue, didn't blame the land, didn't blame the weather. He just stopped. And that's how the ranch ended up where it was now. Not in the hands of someone new, but in the hands of a system that didn't care what it used to be, waiting to be sold, not as opportunity, but as risk. And that's what brought everyone there that day, the auction, where land like that didn't attract dreamers. It attracted certainty. Certainty that it wouldn't work. Certainty that it had already been tried. Certainty that whoever bought it would be making a mistake. And yet, Ethan Walker showed up anyways, not standing at the front, not trying to be seen, just there, watching, listening, the way he always did, because he wasn't just looking at the land, he was remembering it. He had been there once before, months earlier, just passing through, called out to fix something small, a tractor that wouldn't start. And while everyone else focused on what was broken, Ethan noticed something else, something subtle, something easy to miss. But once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. The land wasn't rejecting growth. It was holding back, recovering, waiting for something different. And that's what stayed with him, not the failure, but the possibility hidden underneath it. And now, standing there at that auction, with people around him already deciding what not to do, Ethan made a decision, a quiet one, the kind that doesn't look important in the moment, but changes everything after. He raised his hand, and just like that, the laughter began. Soft, subtle, unavoidable, because to everyone else, this wasn't confidence. It was a mistake waiting to happen. But Ethan didn't react, didn't explain, didn't defend. He just kept his eyes forward, because he wasn't buying what they saw. He was buying what they missed, and that was only the beginning. The first thing Ethan did wasn't fixing anything, and that confused people, because when someone buys a broken ranch full of dead machines, you expect noise. You expect engines turning, metal clashing, something happening. But for days, nothing did. Ethan didn't start with the tractors, didn't touch the harvesters, didn't even open the barns. Instead, he walked, slowly, across every inch of that land, morning to evening, sometimes longer, not measuring, not marking, just observing. And to anyone watching from a distance, it looked like hesitation, like someone who had finally realized what they had gotten themselves into. The whispers started early. He doesn't even know where to begin, probably regretting that bid already. Give it a week. But Ethan wasn't hesitating. He was listening, because land, even when it looks silent, is always saying something. You just have to know how to read it. And what he saw confirmed what he had felt months earlier. The soil wasn't dead. It was uneven. Patches of it held moisture longer than others. Certain areas had faint traces of old root systems that hadn't completely disappeared. And near the far edge of the property, where most people never bothered to go, there was something even more telling. Wild growth. Not strong, not healthy, but stubborn, the kind that survives without permission. And that was enough. Because to Ethan, you don't build from what's obvious. You build from what refuses to disappear. That's where he started, not with machines, but with the ground. Days passed before anyone heard the first sound of metal. And when it finally came, it wasn't loud, just a dull, repetitive clank from inside one of the oldest barns, the one everyone had already written off completely. Inside sat a tractor no one had touched in years. Not because they didn't try, but because every attempt ended the same way. Failure, parts replaced, adjustments made, time wasted, and eventually, abandonment. Ethan didn't try to start it. That would have been the fastest way to fail again. Instead, he took it apart, piece by piece, not rushing, not forcing anything loose, just understanding it. Hours turned into days, days into weeks, and slowly, the ranch began to change, not in a way people could celebrate, but in a way they couldn't ignore. Because things started moving, not fully, not smoothly, but differently. A wheel that hadn't turned in years shifted slightly. A belt that had long been cracked and stiff was replaced and tightened. A sound that used to be silence became possibility. And still, the laughter didn't stop. If anything, it changed. It became quieter, more personal, less about the machines, and more about Ethan himself. He's wasting his time. You can't fix land like that. Doesn't matter what he repairs, nothing's gonna grow. And that was the real belief they held on to. Because machines weren't the problem. The land was, and everyone knew it. Except, Ethan didn't agree. Not completely. Because while others saw a system that failed, he saw a system that had been pushed too far, for too long, without understanding its limits. So he didn't just fix machines. He changed how they would be used. He adjusted timing, reduced strain, worked smaller sections instead of the entire field at once. And most importantly, he waited, which was something no one else had done long enough. Weeks passed. Then one morning, something happened. Small, almost unnoticeable, but different. A patch of land, barely a few feet wide, held its color longer than the rest, darker, richer, alive, in a way the rest wasn't. Most people wouldn't have seen it, but Ethan did. And he didn't celebrate. Didn't call anyone over. Didn't mark the moment. He just adjusted again. Because one sign doesn't prove anything, but it changes everything. And from that point on, the work became more precise, more intentional. Every movement had a reason. Every repair had a purpose beyond just working again. And slowly, very slowly, the ranch began to respond. Not all at once, but enough. Enough to create doubt, not in Ethan, but in the people watching him. Because now, they weren't laughing the same way. Now, they were watching more closely, trying to figure out what they missed, trying to understand how something they had already decided was over, wasn't behaving like it anymore. And that's when the pressure changed. It wasn't mockery anymore, it was expectation. Because people don't like being wrong quietly. They want proof. They want a moment where everything either works or collapses completely. And that moment was coming. Because out there, just beneath the surface, something had already begun. Something no one could see yet. But Ethan could feel it. And he knew it wouldn't stay hidden much longer. The land was about to answer. For weeks, nothing dramatic happened. No sudden transformation. No overnight miracle. Just quiet progress. The kind that's easy to miss if you're not the one doing the work. But something had changed. Not just in the land, but in the air around it. Because people had stopped laughing. Not completely, but enough for silence to start replacing it. And silence is where doubt begins. They still drove past the ranch, still slowed down, just enough to look. But now, they weren't shaking their heads. They were searching, trying to find proof that this would all fall apart. Because it had to. It always did. Except, this time, it didn't. It started early one morning. Before the sun had fully risen, Ethan was already out there, standing in the same section of land where weeks ago he had noticed that first small patch. Except now, it wasn't small anymore. It had spread, not wildly, not perfectly, but undeniably, green, real, alive. And for a moment, he didn't move, didn't speak, didn't react. Because this was the part no one sees, the moment where effort finally meets proof. And it doesn't feel loud, it feels quiet, certain. But the quiet didn't last, because by mid-morning, someone else saw it. A truck slowed down, then stopped. The driver stepped out, walked a little closer, and just stood there, confused, because what he was looking at didn't match what he believed. And that's how it spread. Not through announcements, but through disbelief. One person told another, then another, and before long, people started showing up, not in crowds, at first, just a few at a time, standing at the edge of the field, like they weren't sure they were allowed to come closer, watching, trying to understand what exactly they were seeing. Because it wasn't just green anymore, it was structured, rows, early growth, lined with intention, and right beside it, machines that once sat dead were now moving, not perfectly, but working. And that's when it hit them. This wasn't luck. This wasn't temporary. This was real. And then, the moment came. The one they had all been waiting for, whether they admitted it or not. Harvest. The same land that hadn't produced anything in years was about to give something back. And nobody wanted to miss it. By the time Ethan started the machine that morning, they were already there, more than before. Some standing, some sitting on truck beds, all watching, waiting. The engine turned over. Once, then again, and for a split second, it sounded like it might fail, like everything else before it. But then, it didn't. It held, steady, alive. And as the machine moved forward, cutting through the first section, something shifted in the crowd. Because this wasn't just a harvest, it was proof. Proof that they were wrong. Proof that what they had given up on wasn't finished. And most of all, proof that Ethan had seen something they didn't. No one spoke, not at first. Because moments like that don't need noise, they need time. Time for reality to replace assumption. Time for truth to settle in. And as the first yield collected, as the rows continued, as the machine kept moving, you could see it, on every face, that shift, from doubt to disbelief to something else entirely. Respect, not loud, not announced, but undeniable. Because in the end, people don't remember the opinions they had. They remember the moment those opinions broke. And this was that moment. By sunset, the ranch didn't look abandoned anymore. It didn't look broken. It didn't even look the same. It looked alive. Not perfect, but real. And that's all it ever needed to be. Ethan didn't give a speech, didn't explain what he did, didn't correct anyone, because he didn't have to. The land had already done that for him. And as people slowly left, one by one, they didn't laugh, they didn't whisper, they didn't question, they just looked back, one last time, because what they had seen was something rare, not just a harvest, but a reminder that sometimes the difference between failure and success isn't the land, isn't the tools, isn't even the timing. It's the person who refuses to walk away from it. And that's why the ranch came back to life. Not because it couldn't fail, but because someone finally gave it a reason not to. And that silenced everyone.